Golden State Media Concepts Technology Podcast covers everything tech. The hottest mobile phones, tablets, games. We review it, rate it, test it. Whether you're Microsoft or Apple, Android or iPhone, we'll give it to you again. Black and white. The Golden State Media Concepts Technology Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the GSMC Technology Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mackenzie, and on today's podcast, we are going to take a look at what is new in the tech industry, both with companies that you should pay attention to and products that you might want to keep in mind for the next couple of years. These are going to be both companies and products that will totally change the game of technology, so you're going to want to stay tuned for that. And as always, if you're not already, hit that subscribe button. We post new episodes of this podcast every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and we would absolutely love to have you join our community here. And also, being a part of our community lets you tell me what you would like to hear more about. You can suggest products I should review or maybe tech news you would like me to look into further. So definitely consider writing a review down below with your thoughts or connecting through social media. But anyways, welcome to today's podcast. I'm very excited to have you here. So get ready because you are listening to the GSMC Technology Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mackenzie, and let's get into it. So before we get into the meat and potatoes of today's episode, let's talk about what is new in the technology world. Our first story today is that the United States Army has banned their soldiers from using TikTok on government-owned phones following a decision to ban the app altogether. So this all really started because the app is owned by a Beijing-based company, ByteDance. Army spokeswoman, Lieutenant Colonel Robin Orca said it is considered a cyber threat. So they will not be using it anymore. So I'm so sorry for anyone who is following some Army soldiers on TikTok. They are no longer allowed to use this piece of technology. So let me know what you think of the Army banning TikTok, and let me know if you actually use TikTok yourself. I thought it was going to be a flash in a pan, but it has definitely stuck around a lot longer than that. So let me know in the review down below or reach out through social media. AT&T 5G's coverage expands to 6 new cities, including New York, Philadelphia, and Las Vegas. We're actually going to be talking about 5G phones later in the podcast, so definitely stay tuned for that. But right now, let's talk about AT&T. So they continue to roll out its low-band 5G network with an addition to 6 new cities that add some of the biggest urban areas to the U.S., which is New York and Washington, D.C., Baltimore, Las Vegas, Detroit, and Philadelphia. So I think this is another great idea from AT&T, and it really is just demonstrating how they understand what the market is asking for and what technology is really needed in this new fast-paced decade that we're all living in. So congrats AT&T, and thank you for implementing this new technology because I think we will all find it useful and engaging. So our final story of today is that Google may have just beat humans at spotting breast cancer, but don't worry for all those people who operate the breast cancer mammograms. Google is not replacing you, they are simply helping. So Google is developing an artificial intelligence program to help doctors identify breast cancer. The model, which scans X-ray images, known as mammograms, reduces the number of false negatives by 9.4%. A hopeful leap forward for a test currently misses 20% of breast cancer. So ultimately, they were able to reduce false negatives by 9.4% and cut down the false positives by 5.7% for women in the U.S. Meanwhile, for women in the UK, where 2 radiologists typically double-check the results, the model cut down false negatives by 2.7% in the UK and reduced false positives by 1.2%. So this is a great story. We obviously always love hearing this stuff, and I'm excited to learn more about this technology as it grows. I think this is a great example and something we should always be thinking about when it comes to technology is, yes, tech is a lot of fun. Yes, tech is really cool, but what is the point of inventing all this really cool and awesome looking stuff if it's actually not helping the greater good? And so I do think that inventions like this aren't just important for the tech industry, but they're important for the world at large. And so I'm really hoping that over the next decade, and we're going to talk about the advances that we're growing in tech and companies that are starting in tech, but I'm really hoping that in the next decade, we see a lot of advances in healthcare tech and in other in other industries that tech could really be useful for. So I'm definitely excited to see what this new year brings for the tech industry. All right, everyone, we're going to go ahead and take a short break from the podcast, but when we come back, we are going to take a look at some companies you should pay attention to for the next couple of years. They are making huge strides in the technology world, and they're all startups, which is really, really cool. So we're going to take a look at those and more when we come back. So thank you, and stay tuned, because you are listening to the GSMC Technology Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mackenzie Jakewish, and I'll be right back.
Do you work in the world of marketing and advertising? Are you a media buyer or the owner of an agency? Have you been looking for a podcast to help stay on top of all the goings-on of those worlds? The GSMC Marketing News Podcast is dedicated to keeping you up to date on all things concerning marketing and advertising. Get the latest marketing news, from what major businesses have planned for the coming year to the newest trends in advertising, from podcasts, digital and streaming, to the old standbys of radio, television, and billboards. The GSMC Marketing News Podcast has you covered, whether you're a marketing agent or a business trying to expand your brand.
Welcome back to the GSMC Technology Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. If you love this podcast and you love listening to other podcasts, make sure you check out some of the other terrific podcasts that are hosted on the GSMC Podcast Network. There's another great one about marketing that I host. We have a really, really fun one on social media, and there's some other fun football, entertainment, and lifestyle podcasts you should definitely check out. And if you're not already subscribed to this podcast, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button. We definitely love hearing from you guys, so make sure you write a review as well. But welcome back to this podcast episode. Before the break, we were talking about what is new in the technology world. We talked about AT&T releasing their 5G phone, which we're going to talk about 5G phones later in this podcast as well, because they definitely are the future. And at the GSMC Technology Podcast, we are always looking towards the future, as is everyone in technology. So very interesting that AT&T is releasing this new and exciting gadget for us. We also talked about an AI technology that allows you to look for breast cancer and not have so many false negatives or false positives as there are with normal mammogram scans. This is a huge advancement in the technology world. I am thrilled that it is happening, and it's amazing, and it's exciting to be a part of the generation that is getting to watch those things happen in front of us. So definitely another great advancement in technology. We also talked about more of a fun one, but more of a, I don't want to say it's fun, but definitely not as overwhelming as the breast cancer technology. But we talked about the U.S. Army banning TikTok from their soldiers. This is definitely seems like an odd choice, but when you read the story, and I'll make sure to tweet out the story later today, it does make a lot of sense based on what the information we're being given. So all I can say is if you have TikTok, let me know, because I'm just curious if TikTok is worth getting to begin with. So without further ado, let's get into the rest of today's podcast. with the new year starting, I thought it would be a great idea to talk about some tech startups you should be looking out for in this coming decade and just even over the next year. These are definitely some names that might not be too big yet, but will be big in the next couple of years. So you're definitely going to want to listen for them. The first one I want to talk about is called Convoy. So Convoy is reinventing the supply chain with this technology that is going to allow truckers, they're going to connect shippers with carriers while solving them some of the toughest problems they might hit on the industry. So this is a great way to sort of cut out the middleman and really get to the sorts of the problems that maybe truckers and shippers have been having with their carriers and help problem solve them. So a really great piece of technology that is being used here that is hopefully going to save a lot of people a lot of time and a lot less stress. So definitely look out for Convoy, considering they had a pretty big investment this year from Mr. Jeff Bezos of Amazon. Very interesting as well, because Convoy is a Seattle startup, and as we all know, Amazon has completely taken over Seattle. So very interesting to see those two companies work together to hopefully create a really great product. The next one I want to talk about is Duolingo. It is a great startup that went from being this tiny company to being now worth more than $1 billion. And it only took them 8 years to do that, which is insane. But basically it is a language learning app where you can learn everything from French to Japanese. It's a way that you can learn a language while playing a video game. So it actually helps you engage with the content more rather than just reading it off of a screen. So definitely a fun app, definitely a cool piece of technology, and definitely something I'm going to be downloading after I finish this podcast. So definitely stay tuned for that and take a look at the company Duolingo for yourself, because they are definitely inventing some cutting edge technology that we should all be excited about. So Aptiv. So Aptiv is another ride-sharing app. This is a self-driving car, though, and it's making big moves. Their vehicles have traveled 3,400 miles from San Francisco to New York City in 99% fully automotive mode. So nobody was driving them. That is crazy. So with a $4 billion joint venture with Hyundai Motor Group, this operation is well underway, and I won't be shocked if we have self-driving cars from this company coming out within the next 10 years for people to buy. Doppler. So Doppler will be interesting for those tech lovers out there, which is probably all of you because this is a tech podcast, but this is extremely interesting for those of you that are computer programmers or working with code, because Doppler is a software that allows you to not have to remember all of those really long passwords, and they say that their platform can help teams shave 8 or more hours from a project by remembering passwords for them. So say goodbye to having to write your passwords down on a post-it note, because it is time to just download Doppler and get into it. My only question is, does Doppler work for my Facebook account? Because I can never remember the password for that. So if it does that, I'm on board. I'm all for it. So definitely stay tuned for this company as well. Jet Closing, another Seattle startup that is based on property management, which I'm always for anything that helps property management be a little bit more organized. As someone who has bought a house, I understand that there's so much paperwork that goes involved and so many little details to take care of that it seems almost impossible to keep it all together and keep it all organized. Jet Closing has developed a technology that, one, saves a ton of paper, so helping the environment there, which is great, but it also helps you and your realtor and anyone who is involved with the house buying experience keep all of that paperwork organized and in one place. So it is definitely a company to look out for. They have raised $23.4 million to date from VC big shots like T. Rowe Price. So Jet Closing is definitely a company that you need to look out for if you're looking to buy your house, sell your house, or if you're just interested in the real estate startup market. I've heard of them before a little bit because they have definitely been around for the past 2 years, but they've been in a silent stealth mode. But now they have finally emerged from their little computer programming caves and have come out with an AI-enabled marketing technology. So I think I've talked about this before. I host the other marketing podcast. I work in marketing. So I am for any kind of technology that helps advance that world, because honestly, marketing and technology go hand in hand in so many different ways that I think it's almost impossible to not talk about one without the other a lot of the time. So New Engine is super great that they're building this technology and that it's going to be available for use. It helps with the success of marketing strategies across keywords and search, e-commerce portal, and social media, and then it adjusts the resources accordingly. So this is brilliant. It's going to definitely make SEO and SEM a lot easier. So if you're in the tech and marketing world like I am, you're probably very excited about this startup. Band geeks or current band geeks excited. It is called Snap Raise, and it is Snap with an exclamation point, which makes total sense because I am also very excited about this product. Snap Raise is a technology startup that is trying to help kids who have signed up for extracurricular activities such as band raise money for those activities without having to go door to door. And they're trying to take all the work off of those program and camp leaders because, let's face it, it is a ton of work trying to put those programs together, and raising money for them is a whole other job. So what SnapRaise does is it's a technology that will set up web pages for you, take a look at expenses, and it tracks contributors and participant activity. It essentially takes those tasks off of the program leaders' plates, while social media interrogations help connect the fundraiser with a wider audience. So they're really doing all the marketing and technology stuff for these camp leaders because they should be focused on the kids, and the kids should be focused on the program rather than having to go door to door and sell chocolate, which is what I had to do every weekend while I was in band. So this is definitely a really great Seattle startup, and just startup in general, that I'm very excited about. Okay, everyone, we're going to go ahead and take another break from the podcast, but when we come back, we are going to talk about products you should be paying attention to for the next couple of years, because they could totally change the game of technology, and we should all maybe take note of them before it's too late. So stay tuned, because you are listening to the GSMC Technology Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mackenzie Jakewish, and I'll be right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Hello and welcome back to the GSMC Technology Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Before the break, we were talking about companies that are changing the game in the technology world. We talked about SnapRaise, which is helping foundations and programs for kids raise money without kids having to go door to door, which is a super great piece of technology that is definitely going to help a lot of people on a day-to-day basis. We also talked about some computer programs that are coming out that you should pay attention to, and some new marketing technology that if you're interested in the technology and marketing world, you will definitely be interested in these startups. So now that we are back from our break, we are going to take a look at some products you might want to pay attention to that could be coming out in the next decade. We're talking about tech trends that could totally change the game in 2020. As we all know, it is the start of a new decade, and a new decade will bring tons of advancements in the tech world, and there might also be a few fails that happen along the way. If you want to hear about the fails that happened in the past decade, that's an episode that we did a few weeks ago. Definitely go check that out. And hey, in 10 years, maybe I'll be making a podcast about all the things that went wrong over these past 10 years. But for now, let's take a look at some of the predictions of what tech could seriously change the game in 2020. The first one is affordable 5G phones and a more expansive network. So an affordable 5G phone is definitely something we all want and could all use. But could you imagine the world where everyone could actually have one? This would totally change the game for how we shop online, for how we experience entertainment, for how we basically live our lives. I know that I'm definitely someone who has a slower phone. I don't have a 5G phone, and it definitely does impact my world and how I operate online. If I were to have a 5G phone, I would get so much more done in a day. So I definitely think that having a more expansive network and affordable 5G would help not only me, but probably the entire country at least, because we all love shopping online and we all love everything to come immediately. Convenience is key right now in the world, so all the technology we'll be coming up with will probably help make our world more convenient, if anything else, because that is something that we're all really looking for. VR hand tracking. So a lot of you have probably seen a VR system by now, and by VR I do mean virtual reality. I've experienced a VR game setup before. It's definitely interesting. It's definitely fun. One of the things that I found a little annoying about it is the fact that it didn't have a hand tracker on it. You were holding two remotes. It was very similar almost to the setup of a Wii. So if we were all to have these hand tracking abilities that would really let us move around and pick things up in a more realistic way, can you imagine the possibilities? Now, not only just for gaming. Think about if we could use these VR systems in hospitals for training doctors, or we can even go like smaller scale. Like what if this is how we taught mechanics how to like fix cars instead of on actual cars? Obviously cars and people are two totally different boats, and let's give this to doctors first. But I'm just saying this could change the way of how we train, how we operate, and more importantly, how we game. Because I'll definitely play more VR headset games if I have a hand tracker ability. The Microsoft Surface Duo Neo. So in 2019, the trend definitely wasn't to have something fold together. That's not super trendy or futuristic. That definitely sounds more like an old-fashioned flip phone than anything else. But I do think it has a lot of really cool features. It's definitely interesting that it is a flip open phone, and perhaps we'll be seeing a lot of these in the next couple of years. Maybe it will be the new trend that takes over. It definitely does have a very sleek design that I quite enjoy. Okay, everyone, that is our show for today. Thank you for listening to the GSMC Technology Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mackenzie Jaquish, and thank you for listening today. Please make sure you subscribe to the podcast, reach out through social media, and write a review down below. I'll see you next time.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Technology Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.